Ask any man if he's lonely, and most will say no. Ask if he has someone he could call at 2 a.m. and actually be honest with, and the room goes quiet. That's the gap nobody talks about. Men aren't disappearing all at once. They're disappearing one unanswered message at a time, one "I'm good" at a time, until an entire life can look full on the outside and feel completely empty on the inside. Nobody around him would call this man lonely. He shows up, he works, he laughs when he needs to. But somewhere behind the routine, something has gone very quiet. This is what male loneliness actually looks like. Not a breakdown, not a confession, just another evening that passes without one honest conversation. And here's the part that should stop you. He might not even call it loneliness. He'll call it being tired, being busy, needing space, because somewhere along the way, admitting you need people started to feel like admitting you failed. Psychologists have noticed something strange in how men and women describe feeling alone. Women often say the ache comes from missing one close bond, someone they can be fully honest with. Men more often describe something different, missing a group, a brotherhood, a place where they belong without having to explain themselves first. A man can have a partner who loves him and still feel completely unanchored if he has no one else who really knows him. That gap starts early, long before adulthood. As boys, many are handed the same quiet rules: don't cry too much, don't be needy, handle it yourself. None of those lessons sound cruel on their own. But repeated for years, they teach a boy something he never chose to believe, that his feelings are a little too much for the room. This is where attachment steps in. A child learns whether the world is safe through thousands of small moments, being comforted, being heard, being allowed to fall apart a little without losing anyone's respect. When that comfort gets rushed past, or laughed off, or simply missing, the nervous system quietly draws its own conclusion. Not "I am unlovable," something smaller and somehow more permanent. Handle this alone. So he grows into a man who can fix almost anything, except the feeling that no one would notice if he disappeared for a week. Here's what's actually happening underneath that feeling, inside the body itself. Researchers studying social pain, including work out of UCLA, have found that being excluded activates some of the same brain regions involved in physical pain. That's not just a figure of speech. Rejection can register in the body almost like an injury. So when a man insists that being ignored shouldn't bother him, his own nervous system may quietly disagree. Chronic loneliness changes something else too. The psychologist John Cacioppo spent decades studying isolation, and he described loneliness as a kind of internal alarm, not unlike hunger, except this one is asking for people instead of food. But when that alarm keeps ringing without ever being answered, it doesn't just create sadness. Research suggests it can make the brain more alert to rejection, even in situations that were never actually threatening. A slow reply starts to feel intentional. A canceled plan starts to feel personal. The very connection a lonely man needs most begins to look, to his own mind, like a risk worth avoiding. One large study, drawing on brain scans from close to 40,000 people, found something else worth sitting with. Prolonged loneliness was linked to differences inside the brain's default network, the part tied to memory, imagination, and replaying old conversations in your head. Some researchers believe a lonely brain may lean harder on memory and imagination, quietly trying to manufacture the company it can't find anywhere else. Which may be one reason old friendships, old conversations, sometimes feel more vivid than the actual room he's sitting in tonight. This is how the loneliness cycle locks itself into place. Loneliness creates hypervigilance. Hypervigilance makes ordinary contact feel risky, so he withdraws, just to feel safe again. Withdrawal quietly removes the very moments that could have proven the fear wrong. And the silence that follows gets filed away as evidence, not of bad luck, but of something wrong with him. If any of this is landing close to home, you're not imagining it, and you're not the only one sitting with it tonight. This channel exists for exactly this reason. So if this feels familiar, hit subscribe, because there's more of this waiting for you. Here's the part that rarely gets said out loud. A A man can be surrounded by people and still be starving for connection, because being liked was never the same thing as being known. He can be included in every group chat, invited to every gathering, and still be the one person in the room nobody actually checks on, not because they don't care, because he taught them, without ever meaning to, that he doesn't need checking on. He answers good so convincingly that people stop asking twice. Part of the reason he never corrects them is fear, and it's a very specific kind of fear, not the fear of being told no. The fear of what happens after someone finally sees the real weight he's been carrying. He worries that once he's honest, he stops being the reliable one and starts being the project, so he keeps performing steadiness long after steadiness has become exhausting to maintain. Modern life hands that isolation 1,000 comfortable hiding places. Social media offers the appearance of contact without any of the risk that comes with the real thing. Gaming can feel like belonging for exactly as long as the headset stays on. Endless scrolling fills the hours without ever touching the ache underneath them. None of these things are the enemy here. They simply weren't built to hold what a person actually needs. They can occupy an entire evening. They were never going to fill the silence underneath it. Picture the version of this that plays out in real living rooms every night. A man sits down after work, orders food he won't finish, and opens an app instead of a conversation. Somewhere in his contacts is a childhood friend he hasn't spoken to in 3 years. He thinks about texting him. He decides it would be weird now, so he closes the thought, the way he closes most of them, and lets the show keep playing instead. Here's the truth almost nobody tells a lonely man. He doesn't need a bigger circle. He doesn't need to become louder, easier, or more impressive to be around. What he actually needs is one relationship where he doesn't have to perform being fine, one person who can hear "I'm not okay" without flinching, without immediately trying to fix it. One place where silence isn't judged and honesty doesn't cost him anything he can't afford to lose. Because loneliness was never really about how many people know his name. It's about how much of the real him would actually be missed if he stopped pretending tomorrow. Somewhere tonight, a man will lock his phone screen and set it face down. He won't tell anyone how that felt. Tomorrow, he'll say he's fine, and most people around him will believe it. Not because he's lying to them, because he's had a lot of practice. But the ache underneath all of it was never proof that something is wrong with him. It was proof that some part of him never actually stopped hoping to be found. Not every quiet man is lonely, and not every man who prefers his own company is hiding something. But if you recognized any part of yourself in this tonight, that recognition is worth taking seriously, not brushing past the way he usually would. Loneliness stops being dangerous the moment it stops being a secret. The first honest sentence is always the hardest one, and it's also the one that ends up costing the least.